There was no cake on my 32nd birthday, only witnesses. Almost 100 relatives watched as my father slid a file toward me like a contract. Inside was an invoice for raising me and a declaration that silenced the room. I did not cry. I stood up, smiled, and walked out as if it were a gift. They had no idea I was already holding the cards to topple their entire charade before the night was over. My name is Natalie Hart, and turning 32 felt less like a celebration and more like a subpoena. I parked my sedan 3 blocks away from the sprawling colonial estate in Stonebridge, Illinois, because the circular driveway was already packed tight with Range Rovers and Mercedes SUVs. The humid Midwest summer air clung to my skin as I walked toward the house I had grown up in, but the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees the moment I stepped onto the pristine, manicured porch. Inside, the house was not filled with the chaotic, warm buzz of a birthday party. Instead, it hummed with the low, regulated frequency of a shareholders' meeting held to discuss a declining asset. That asset, evidently, was me. My father, Gordon Hart, was waiting in the foyer. He did not hug me. He extended a hand, his grip firm and dry, the same handshake he used for local zoning board members and golf club applicants. He wore a navy blazer with gold buttons. His silver hair swept back in a style that suggested authority and benevolence, though the benevolence never quite reached his eyes. "You are late, Natalie," he said, checking his watch. It was 6:00 on the dot. "I am exactly on time, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. He gave a tight, dismissive smile, the kind a person uses when they have already decided you are wrong but do not want to waste the breath explaining why. "Just go inside," he said. "Everyone is waiting." The dining room had been transformed. Usually, this room held a table for 12. Today, the French doors were thrown open to the patio, and rented round tables filled the entire lower floor, creating a banquet hall effect. Nearly 100 relatives were seated. There were aunts I had not seen since high school, cousins who lived on the West Coast, and great-uncles who usually only left their homes for funerals. They were all here, and as I walked in, the conversation did not taper off naturally. It was severed, as if someone had cut a wire. 100 pairs of eyes locked onto me. The silence was heavy, physical. It pressed against my eardrums. I looked for my mother, Marianne. She was standing by the main buffet table, obsessively adjusting a massive arrangement of white lilies. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the petals, her fingers trembling slightly as she turned a bloom 2 degrees to the right, then 2 degrees back to the left, in the Hart household. Silence was not peace. Silence was simply the holding pattern before a strike. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered to myself, forcing my legs to move. Then I saw Brielle. My younger sister was holding court at the center table, wearing a shimmering emerald cocktail dress that caught every photon of light in the room. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a flute of champagne in her hand. A circle of cousins leaned in, rapt, absorbing her radiance. Brielle was the success story, the brand ambassador of the Hart bloodline. I was the anomaly, the error code in their perfect genetic programming. I scanned the room for a place to sit, assuming I would be relegated to a corner or the kids' table, as was tradition. But then I saw the placard with my name. It was at the head of the room, a single chair, positioned in front of the fireplace, facing out toward the sea of relatives. My stomach twisted. This was not a seat of honor. I looked at the arrangement of the other tables. They were not scattered randomly. They were angled. Every single chair in the room had a direct line of sight to my seat. It was a gallery, a theater, and I was the only performer on stage. I walked to the chair and sat down. The wood was cold against my back. The silence stretched on, uncomfortable and thick. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the distant sound of a car passing on the main road. No one offered me a drink. No one said hello. They just watched, waiting for the cue. Gordon walked to the front of the room. He did not need a microphone. His voice had been trained in courtrooms and boardrooms to carry without effort. He stood next to me, placing a hand on the back of my chair. It felt like a jailer checking a lock. "Thank you all for coming," Gordon said. His tone was smooth, rich with faux warmth. "We are here to mark a significant milestone for Natalie. 32 years, a long time." He paused. The room leaned in. "But before we celebrate, we must address the reality of our family," he continued. He looked at my mother. "Marianne?" Marianne stopped fiddling with the flowers. She wiped her hands on her silk skirt, a nervous tick she thought no one noticed, and walked toward the fireplace behind me. I turned slightly to watch her. She avoided my gaze, staring fixedly at the crown molding. Above the mantel hung 3 portraits, one of Gordon, one of Marianne, and a large one of Brielle and me from when we were teenagers. Marianne reached up. She took the frame down. For a second, I thought she was going to hand it to me, perhaps as a sentimental gesture. Instead, she placed it face down on the mantelpiece. The sound of the glass hitting the wood echoed in the silent room. Clack! She turned and walked back to her seat without a word. A murmur ran through the crowd, a low wave of shock and understanding. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I kept my spine straight. It was a symbolic execution. In the language of our family, placing a photo face down was how you signaled that someone had died or had been erased. I was sitting right there, breathing, my heart hammering against my ribs. But socially, I had just been pronounced dead. Gordon cleared his throat. He reached into his inner blazer jacket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was not a greeting card. It was too heavy, too rigid. "Natalie," he said, his voice dropping to a register of sorrowful disappointment that I knew took hours of practice in front of a mirror. "We have loved you. We have supported you. But love cannot be a one-way street forever. A parasite eventually kills the host, unless the host cuts it off." He tossed the envelope onto the table in front of me. It slid across the polished wood and stopped inches from my hand. "It is time you paid your debts to this family," he said. I looked at the envelope. My name was printed on it in calligraphy, beautiful and sharp. I looked up at the 100 relatives. Some looked gleeful, feeding on the drama. Others looked down at their laps, embarrassed but unwilling to intervene. Brielle was smirking behind her champagne glass, her eyes bright with anticipation. I opened the envelope. Inside was not a letter. It was a document, a spreadsheet, printed on high-quality bond paper, stapled at the corner. I pulled it out. The header read, "Cost of upbringing and maintenance, Natalie Hart." I stared at the lines. It was an invoice, a literal invoice. Obstetrics and delivery, 32 years ago, $4,500. Orthodontic correction, age 12, $6,200. Clothing allowance, ages 0 to 18, $22,000. State University tuition assistance, $18,000. Room and board. Periodic stays post-graduation, $5,000. Interest accrued at 4% per annum, $112,000. The final total at the bottom was bolded, $246,700. There was a signature line at the bottom, and next to it, a date. Payment due. Immediately. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, hysterical and sharp, but I swallowed it down. This was insane. It was legally unenforceable nonsense. Parents do not invoice their children for existing, but as I read the line items, I realized the cruelty was the point. They had itemized my life. They had put a price tag on every bowl of cereal I ate as a child, every doctor visit, every moment of care. They had reduced my entire existence to a bad investment they were trying to liquidate. This was not about money. This was a show. Gordon wanted the relatives to see this. He wanted to paint a narrative where I was the leech, the burden, the failure who had drained the family resources, justifying whatever punishment he was about to inflict. "Read the total." "Natalie," Gordon commanded. I looked up at him. His eyes were cold, daring me to make a scene, daring me to cry, to scream, to flip the table. That is what he wanted. He wanted the unstable daughter to explode so he could play the long-suffering patriarch. I looked at Brielle. She gave me a tiny, pitying wave. I looked at the invoice again. $246,000. I ran my thumb over the paper. It was premium stock, likely 20-pound weight. He had spent money to print a bill charging me for money. I did not scream. I did not tear the paper. I placed my hands flat on the table, feeling the cool varnish under my palms. I forced my breathing to slow down. In for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds. It was a technique I used when analyzing high-risk data patterns at work. Panic is just noise. Look for the signal. The signal was clear. This was an ambush, and you do not fight an ambush by charging into the line of fire. You wait, you assess. I folded the invoice neatly and placed it back in the envelope. "Is that all?" I asked. My voice was quiet, steady, cutting through the tension like a razor. Gordon blinked. He had expected tears. He had expected begging. He stepped back, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "Oh, no," he said, and the cruelty in his voice sharpened. "We are just getting started." He turned toward the door, raising his hand to signal someone outside, and I realized with a cold clarity that the invoice was just the opening act. The real blade was still waiting to drop. The silence that followed Gordon's declaration was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and filled with the collective judgment of 98 people who were glad they were not sitting in my chair. The invoice lay on the table between us, a paper grenade that had failed to detonate my composure. Gordon stared at me, his eyes searching for a crack, a tear, a tremor. When he found none, his jaw tightened. He did not like it when his scripts went off the rails. He needed me to be the villain so he could remain the benevolent patriarch who had no choice but to cut off a rot. "You have seen the figures." "Natalie," Gordon said, his voice projecting to the back of the room where Great Aunt Martha sat adjusting her hearing aid. "This family operates on investment and return. We have poured resources into you for 3 decades. We have waited for a return on that investment. We have waited for gratitude. We have waited for success." He paused for effect. "Instead, we have received nothing but mediocrity and distance." He gestured to the room, his arms sweeping wide to encompass the aunts, uncles, and cousins who were now staring at their dinner plates or sipping wine with feigned disinterest. "These people are witnesses," he announced. "If you cannot settle this debt, if you cannot prove your value to this family by midnight tonight, then you are no longer a heart. We will sever all ties. You will be a stranger to us. No inheritance, no contact, no family." I looked at the invoice again. $246,000. He knew I did not have that kind of money sitting in a checking account. He knew I lived in a rented apartment in West Haven. He knew I drove a 5-year-old sedan. This was not a demand for payment. It was a public execution disguised as a business transaction. I opened my mouth to speak, to point out the absurdity of charging interest on childhood braces, but movement to my right stopped me. It was Brielle. My sister pushed her chair back and stood up. The emerald sequins of her dress scraped against the edge of the table. She did not look at me. She looked at the table where my car keys sat next to my clutch. I had placed them there when I sat down. A reflex. Brielle reached out, her manicured fingers, tipped in the same blood-red polish she had worn since high school, closed around the key fob. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sharp. "Put those back." Brielle smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who knows the trap has already snapped shut. "You cannot drive a car that does not belong to you." "Natalie," she said, her voice light and conversational, as if she were explaining the rules of a board game to a slow child. I frowned. "I paid for that car. I have paid the insurance, the gas, and the repairs for 5 years." "You paid the operating costs," Gordon interrupted, stepping in to reinforce her flank. "But you never checked the title, did you?" My stomach dropped. I thought back to the dealership. 5 years ago. Gordon had insisted on handling the paperwork. "I will get you a better rate with my credit," he had said. "It is a graduation gift, sort of. Just pay the monthly note." I had trusted him. I had been 27 and naive enough to think my father wanted to help me. I checked the registration this morning, Brielle said, dangling the keys from her index finger. The Honda is titled to Gordon Hart, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, he transferred full ownership to the family trust, which means legally, you are currently in possession of stolen property. She dropped the keys into her own purse. The metal clinking against her phone sounded like a gavel striking a block. I felt a cold flush rise up my neck. It was not just the car, it was the implication. How many other things in my life were anchored to them? My apartment lease? My student loans? I had spent my adult life thinking I was independent, building a wall between myself and their toxicity. But they had been tunneling underneath that wall the entire time. They had kept the receipts. They had kept the titles. They owned the ground I was standing on. I looked around the room. No one moved. My cousin Mike, who I used to build forts with in the backyard, looked away. My mother was studying her fingernails. They all knew. They had probably discussed it over appetizers before I arrived. Watch Natalie lose everything. It will be a good show. You can walk home, Gordon said. It is a nice night for a walk. It will give you time to think about how you have disappointed us. I gripped the edge of the table. My knuckles turned white. The urge to scream was a physical pressure in my chest, expanding against my ribs. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to shatter the wine glasses and wipe the smug look off Brielle's face. But that is exactly what they wanted. If I screamed, I was the crazy daughter. If I cried, I was the weak daughter. If I fought for the keys, I was the violent daughter. I forced myself to uncurl my fingers. I took a breath. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Is that it? I asked. You take my car. You give me a fake bill. Is the show over? Gordon laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Oh, Natalie, you really do not pay attention, do you? We are not just cutting off the past. We are ensuring the future remains protected from your influence. He turned toward the double oak doors that led to the main hallway. He nodded once. The doors opened. For a moment, I expected a lawyer, or perhaps a police officer to escort me out for trespassing. But the man who walked in made the air leave my lungs. He was wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too big and scuffed brown loafers. He looked terrified, sweating profusely despite the aggressive air conditioning. He clutched a briefcase to his chest like a shield. It was Marcus, my team lead at Northline Integrity Solutions. My brain stalled. This made no sense. Northline was a 40-minute drive away. Marcus was a middle manager who spent his days optimizing data flow and complaining about corporate compliance. He had never met my family. He did not move in these circles. Gordon gestured to the spot next to him, like a ringmaster introducing a lion. Mr. Marcus Henderson has been kind enough to join us, Gordon said. We had a long conversation this afternoon regarding the family's concerns about your stability. Marcus would not meet my eyes. He looked at the floor, then at Gordon, then at the chandelier. He looked like a man who had been bought, or threatened, or both. Marcus? I said. What are you doing here? Marcus cleared his throat. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his upper lip. I am sorry. Natalie, he stammered. His voice was weak, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. Speak up. Mr. Henderson, Gordon commanded. Marcus jumped. He straightened his spine, reciting a line he had clearly memorized in the car ride over. Due to recent information brought to our attention regarding your personal financial instability and potential ethical compromises, Northline Integrity Solutions feels it is best to sever our professional relationship. The room went dead silent. This was not family drama anymore. This was a livelihood. This was my career. What? I whispered. You are firing me? At my birthday party? It is effective immediately, Marcus said, rushing the words to get them out. We will mail your personal effects. Your access to the servers was revoked an hour ago. But there is no HR here, I said, my logic trying to grapple with the insanity of the situation. You cannot fire me without a review. I have the highest performance metrics on the team. I have never missed a deadline. This is wrongful termination. It is an at-will employment state. Gordon cut in smooth and lethal. And when an employer loses faith in an employee's character, they have every right to protect their company. Mr. Henderson agrees that a woman who defrauds her own family cannot be trusted with sensitive client data. Isn't that right, Marcus? Marcus nodded vigorously, looking like he might vomit. Yes, absolutely. Reputation is key. I stared at them. The picture was complete. Gordon had not just invited Marcus. He had likely threatened to pull some massive account, or perhaps promised an investment, or maybe he simply used his connections to lean on the regional director. It did not matter how he did it. The result was the same. In the span of 10 minutes, I had lost my family, my vehicle, and my job. Gordon folded his arms. He looked at me with a triumphant gleam in his eyes. He was waiting for the collapse. He was waiting for me to fall to my knees and beg. He wanted me to ask for a loan, to ask for the car back, to ask him to fix it with Marcus. He wanted total submission. Brielle leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. Go on, Natalie, she whispered, loud enough for the front tables to hear. Cry. It is what you are good at. I felt the tears pricking the corners of my eyes. Hot, angry tears. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. 1, 2, 3, 4. I looked at Marcus, who was shaking. I looked at Brielle, who was glowing. I looked at my mother, who was still staring at the flower arrangement as if it held the secrets of the universe. And then, something shifted inside me. It was not a snap. It was not an explosion. It was a click, like a lock engaging. The fear evaporated. The sadness vanished. In their place, a cold, crystalline clarity washed over me. They had overplayed their hand. If they had just given me the invoice, I might have felt guilty. If they had just taken the car, I might have felt stranded. But bringing Marcus here, staging a public firing in front of 100 witnesses, that was not discipline. That was malice. And malice leaves a trail. Malice makes mistakes. They thought they were stripping me of everything. In reality, they were freeing me. I had nothing left to lose, and a person with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person in the room. I stood up. The chair legs did not scrape against the floor. I lifted it slightly, pushing it back with precision. The sound of fabric rustling echoed in the silence. I picked up the invoice from the table. I folded it once, then twice. My movements were slow, deliberate. I tucked it into the inner pocket of my blazer, right next to my heart, treating it with the reverence one might give a winning lottery ticket. Gordon frowned. This was not the script. Why aren't you crying? His eyes seemed to ask. I smoothed the front of my jacket. I looked at Marcus. Drive safe, Marcus, I said. You look like you are having a hard night. Marcus flinched. Then I turned to Gordon. I did not yell. I did not raise my voice. I spoke at a normal conversational volume, forcing them to strain to hear me. Thank you, I said. Gordon blinked. Thank you? Thank you for making everything clear. I continued. I spent 32 years wondering what I had to do to be enough for this family. I spent 32 years trying to earn my seat at this table. I paused, letting my gaze drift over the silent relatives. I made eye contact with Aunt Martha. I looked at Cousin Mike. I looked straight at Brielle. But tonight, you showed me that the price of admission is my soul, and that is too expensive, even for me. I picked up my clutch. I did not look at the car keys Brielle had stolen. I did not look at the empty chair. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the door. The sound of my heels clicking on the hardwood floor was a steady metronome. Click, click, click. Natalie, Gordon barked. If you walk out that door, there is no coming back. Do you hear me? You are walking away from everything. I did not stop. I did not slow down. I reached the heavy oak door and pulled it open. The humid night air hit my face, smelling of rain and asphalt. It smelled like freedom. I stepped out and let the door close behind me with a soft, final thud. Inside, they were probably clinking glasses. Inside, they were probably congratulating themselves on finally pruning the weak branch. They thought they had won. They thought they had crushed me. They had no idea. I walked down the long driveway, the gravel crunching under my shoes. I did not have a car. I did not have a job. I did not have a family. But as I reached the main road and pulled my phone out to call a rideshare, I felt lighter than I had in years. They had taken all my shackles, thinking they were stealing my armor. I looked at the house one last time. The windows were glowing with warm, golden light. It looked picture-perfect, a fortress of wealth and reputation. I patted the pocket where the invoice sat. "You want me to pay my debts?" I thought, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time that night. "Okay, Dad, I will pay you. I will pay you back for every single thing." I turned away and began to walk into the dark. The storm was not coming. I was the storm. The Uber ride to West Haven cost me $42. I tipped the driver $5 because he did not ask why a woman in a business suit was staring out the window at 2 a.m. with a face made of stone. My apartment was exactly as I had left it, which felt strange. In the last 6 hours, my entire identity had been dismantled, stripped for parts, and sold off for scrap. Yet my coffee mug was still sitting on the coaster where I had placed it that morning. The silence in my living room was different from the silence at the dinner table. That silence had been weaponized. This silence was sterile. It was the silence of a clean room before surgery. I did not kick off my heels. I did not pour a glass of wine. I did not call my best friend, Sarah, to sob into the phone about how cruel my father was or how evil Brielle had been. Tears were a luxury for people who had a safety net. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and the laptop sitting on my dining table. I sat down and opened the machine. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the dark room with a harsh blue light. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I was not a hacker. I did not know how to write code to break firewalls or bypass encryption. That was the stuff of movies. Real data breaches usually happened because someone was lazy, arrogant, or both. And Gordon Hart was the most arrogant man I knew. 3 years ago, my father had asked me to modernize the family bookkeeping. "You are good with computers." "Natalie," he had said, dismissing my master's degree in data analytics as a hobby, "put this all on the cloud so I do not have to carry these binders." I had done exactly what he asked. I set up a secure server. I digitized 20 years of records. And because Gordon could never remember his passwords and refused to learn two-factor authentication, he had made me the primary administrator. "Just keep it accessible for me," he had ordered. He had fired me from my job tonight. He had disowned me. But in his arrogance, he had forgotten to revoke my access to the one thing he cared about more than his children, his money. I logged into the portal. The cursor blinked. Access granted. I did not go looking for revenge immediately. I went looking for patterns. That was my job at Northline. Risk analysis is not about guessing. It is about listening to what the numbers are whispering. And right now, the numbers were screaming. I pulled up the last 24 months of activity for the Hart Family Trust. On the surface, it looked impressive. It was a dense ecosystem of deposits and withdrawals, labeled with sophisticated terms like capital preservation allocation and diversified yield strategy. To the untrained eye, or to an elderly aunt who just wanted her retirement to be safe, it looked like professional wealth management. But I did not look at the labels. I looked at the routing numbers. I started building a timeline, opening a fresh spreadsheet on my second monitor. I entered the date of the birthday dinner and worked backward. Gordon had handed me an invoice for $246,000. He claimed I was a drain on resources. I typed in a query for outbound transfers, personal. The screen populated with a list that made my breath hitch. There was a recurring transfer of $4,000 a month to a leasing company in Chicago. I cross-referenced the company name. It was a luxury vehicle lessor. The car tied to the account was not my 5-year-old Honda. It was a Porsche Macan. I checked the driver assignment. Brielle Hart. I kept digging. July 14th. A transfer of $8,500 to Sky Blue Aviation. I checked Brielle's Instagram archive for that week. There she was, posing with a glass of champagne in a private jet cabin, captioned, "Hustle Self-Made." August 3rd, $12,000 to Vantage PR firm. The memo line read, "Brand Consulting." My fingers flew across the keys. I was not feeling pain anymore. I was feeling the cold, hard satisfaction of the pieces falling into place. The narrative Gordon spun was that Brielle was the golden child, the successful entrepreneur whose boutique marketing agency was taking the city by storm. The reality was staring me in the face. Brielle was not making money. She was hemorrhaging it. Her entire lifestyle, the apartment, the clothes, the travel, the success, was being directly funded by the trust. But where was the money coming from? Gordon was wealthy, but he was not private jet wealthy, not on his own. I switched tabs to look at the deposits. This was where the cold feeling in my stomach turned into ice. The deposits were not coming from business profits. They were coming from individuals. Martha Jennings, $50,000. Memo, retirement investment. Jonah Hart, $25,000. Memo, college fund contribution. Lucas and Sarah Miller, $100,000. Memo, real estate bridge loan. I scrolled down, page after page. Every cousin, every uncle, every distant relative I had seen at that dinner table tonight had been funneling money into this account. Gordon had positioned himself as the family banker, the wise patriarch who could grow their money better than any bank. He was running a Ponzi scheme, or if not a full Ponzi, a massive misappropriation of funds. He was taking money from Aunt Martha to pay for Brielle's Porsche. He was taking money from Cousin Mike to pay for his own country club dues. And then I found the reason for tonight. I looked at the liquidity ratio. The cash reserves were dangerously low. The account was bleeding. If 3 or 4 relatives asked to withdraw their money at the same time, the whole house of cards would collapse. Gordon needed a distraction. He needed a scapegoat. The invoice, the public disowning, the theatrical firing. It was not just cruelty, it was a strategic diversion. By painting me as the financial failure and the thief, he was planting a seed. If the money went missing, or if the accounts showed irregularities, he could point to the disgruntled, unstable daughter he had just cut off. He could claim I had hacked the system. He could claim I had embezzled it before I left. He had staged the scene with Marcus to establish my lack of ethics in front of witnesses. He was going to frame me for the collapse of the family fortune. I sat back in my chair, the plastic mesh digging into my shoulders. The sheer scale of the betrayal was nauseating. He was not just stealing their money, he was stealing their trust, and he was planning to use my corpse to cover his tracks. But I was not dead yet. I leaned forward again. "Okay, Dad, you want to play forensic accountant? Let us play." I needed more than just spreadsheets. Spreadsheets could be explained away as clerical errors. I needed authorization. I needed to know how he got access to move this much money without triggering alerts from the actual account holders. I dug into the scanned document archive. This was a folder I had created for him to store digital copies of contracts. I found a file named POA's Executed 2023.pdf. I opened it. Power of attorney. Page after page of them. My eyes scanned the signatures. Some were shaky, belonging to relatives in their 80s. Others were bold and trusting, but the text above the signatures was what made my blood run cold. It was a general, durable power of attorney. It was not limited to investment decisions. It gave Gordon Hart the right to act as the signatory for all financial, legal, and property matters in the event that the principal was unavailable or incapacitated. But there was an addendum, buried in the fine print on page 4, a clause that defined unavailable so loosely that Gordon could essentially declare himself in charge whenever he felt like it. And then I saw it, the smoking gun. On Aunt Martha's form, the witness signature was Brielle Hart. On Uncle Robert's form, the witness signature was Brielle Hart. But the dates were wrong. I cross-referenced the dates of signature with Brielle's social media again, on the day she supposedly witnessed Uncle Robert signing a legal document in Illinois. She was geotagged at a music festival in California. She had forged the witness signatures, or they had forged the documents entirely. This was not just bad money management, this was fraud, federal wire fraud, elder abuse, identity theft. I looked at the clock. It was 4:15 in the morning. My eyes burned, but I could not blink. I had to secure this. If Gordon realized I had access, he could wipe the server, or worse, he could alter the logs to make it look like I was the one moving the money. I reached into my bag and pulled out my encrypted external hard drive, a habit from working at Northline. Always have a local backup. I began the download, but I did not just drag and drop files. I did what I was trained to do. I created a forensic image of the directory. I logged the hash values of every file to prove they had not been altered. I took screenshots of the file properties showing the last modified dates were months ago, proving I had not created them tonight. I saved the emails where Gordon gave me the admin passwords. I saved the chat logs where Brielle bragged about her new investors. I saved the bank statements showing the flow of funds from Aunt Martha to the Porsche dealership. I worked with the precision of a surgeon. Every file was a stitch in the shroud I was weaving for my father's reputation. At 5:30, the download bar hit 100%. I ejected the drive. I held it in my hand. It was small, cold, and black. It weighed less than a deck of cards, yet it contained enough explosive material to level a suburban dynasty. I closed the laptop. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was turning a bruised purple, the first hint of dawn bleeding over the rooftops of West Haven. The streetlights were flickering off. My hands were not shaking. At the dinner, I had been a daughter seeking approval. I had been a victim paralyzed by shock. That woman was gone. She had been left behind in that dining room. The woman standing at the window was a senior risk analyst, and I had just completed the most important audit of my career. I knew exactly who I needed to call. I knew exactly which domino to push first. I was not going to scream. I was not going to post on Facebook. I was going to follow the procedure. I turned away from the window and went to the shower. I needed to wash the smell of that house off my skin. I needed to put on fresh clothes. Because today, I was not going to work. Today I was going to war. My phone began to vibrate at 7 in the morning. It was not an alarm. It was a barrage. My screen lit up with names I had walked away from hours ago. Dad, Mom, Brielle, Dad. They were calling in a rhythm that suggested panic. Gordon Hart was not a man who called anyone 5 times in a row unless he had lost control of a situation. He probably expected me to be begging for forgiveness by now, or perhaps he had realized that I had walked out of that house a little too calmly. I flipped the phone face down on the kitchen counter. Let them ring. I had more important calls to make. My first priority was not the fraud in the family accounts. That was a nuclear bomb I was saving for later. My first priority was my shield, my job. Gordon thought he had stripped me of my career by parading Marcus into that dining room. He thought Northline Integrity Solutions was just another country club board he could bully into submission. But Gordon did not understand how modern corporate liability worked. He thought he was dealing with people. I knew I was dealing with a machine, and machines have manuals. I opened my laptop again. My access to the company servers was still blocked. The login screen simply read, "Account disabled. Contact administrator." I did not contact the administrator. I did not reply to the desperate text message that had just come through from Marcus. I read the preview on my lock screen. Marcus, Natalie, please pick up. We need to discuss the exit paperwork. There are things we need to align on before Monday. Please. Align on? That was corporate code for get our stories straight so I do not get sued. Marcus was terrified. He had likely woken up this morning with a hangover and the realization that he had terminated a high-performing employee in a private residence, in front of 100 witnesses, without a single piece of paper from Human Resources. I ignored him. I went straight to the top. I pulled up the personal contact information for Elena Vance. Elena was the Regional Director of Compliance for the entire Midwest Division. 2 years ago, I had flagged a vendor discrepancy that saved her department nearly $300,000. She had told me then, If you ever see something that does not look right, you come straight to me. I dialed her number. It rang twice. Vance, a sharp female voice answered. Elena, it is Natalie Hart, I said. I am sorry to call your personal line on a Sunday morning. There was a pause, then the rustling of paper. Natalie, everything okay? You are usually the one person I do not have to worry about on weekends. I need to report a severe violation of company termination protocol and a potential liability risk involving a mid-level manager. I said. My voice was calm, detached. I was speaking her language. Elena's tone shifted instantly from casual to clinical. Go ahead. Last night, at approximately 7:30 in the evening, I was verbally terminated from my position by my team lead, Marcus Henderson. Okay, Elena said slowly. Verbal terminations happen, though we discourage them. What is the issue? The termination took place at a private birthday party at my parents' house in Stonebridge. I continued. Mr. Henderson was a guest of my father. There was no HR representative present. There was no performance improvement plan on file. There was no written notice. He announced my firing to a room of 100 non-employees, citing vague ethical concerns that have never been documented in any of my reviews. The line went silent for a long 5 seconds. I could almost hear the gears turning in Elena's head as she calculated the legal exposure. He did what? She asked, her voice dropping an octave. He announced it to a room of 100 civilians. I repeated. He claimed my access was revoked due to character concerns raised by my father. Effectively, he allowed a third party, my father, to dictate a personnel decision in a public forum. This was the kill shot. Northline was a data security firm. The idea that a manager would let an outsider influence internal security protocols was not just a firing offense, it was a PR nightmare. I am sending you the documentation now, I said. I hit send on the email I had drafted while the coffee was brewing. It contained a screenshot of the invitation text from my mother, proving the nature of the event. It contained a copy of my last performance review, signed by Marcus 3 months ago, which rated me as exceeds expectations in every category, and it contained a time-stamped log of my access being cut at 6:45, 45 minutes before Marcus even spoke to me. I also have 98 witnesses who can attest to the public nature of the announcement. I added. Elena exhaled, a sharp hiss of air. Natalie, do not speak to Marcus, she ordered. Do not answer his calls. Do not sign anything he sends you. Give me 2 hours. I will wait to hear from you, I said. I hung up. I poured myself a second cup of coffee. I did not pace. I did not worry. I knew exactly what was happening in the Northline headquarters right now. Elena was calling legal. Legal was calling HR. They were looking at the facts and realizing that Marcus had gone rogue. Gordon had thought he was being clever. He thought he was showing his power. But he had forgotten that in the corporate world, procedure is God. By skipping the procedure, he had handed me the weapon. I spent the next hour cleaning my apartment. I folded my laundry. I watered my plants. I moved with the efficiency of a soldier in the barracks. I needed my physical space to be orderly because my mental space was a war room. At 10:15, my phone rang. It was Elena. Natalie? I am here. Your access has been restored, she said. Her voice was crisp, businesslike. We have reviewed the situation. As of this moment, the termination is voided. You are considered an active employee of Northline Integrity Solutions in good standing. Thank you, Elena. There is more, she said. We are opening a formal internal investigation into the events of last night. Mr. Henderson has been placed on administrative leave effective immediately, pending the outcome of that inquiry. I felt a small, cold knot of satisfaction loosen in my chest. Marcus had chosen the wrong side. He had gambled his career on Gordon's influence, and he had lost. We would like you to take tomorrow off, Elena continued. Paid administrative leave, just to let the dust settle. We will have a new reporting structure for you by Tuesday. I understand, I said. And Natalie? Elena's voice softened slightly. losing a fraction of its corporate edge. I do not know what kind of game your father is playing, but Northline does not like being used as a pawn. I know, I said, that is why I called you. I hung up the phone. I sat down at my desk and logged into my work email. The login screen greeted me with a cheerful blue bar. Welcome, Natalie Hart. I navigated to my inbox. There were 3 recalled messages from Marcus. He had tried to unsend his panic. It was too late. I opened a blank sticky note on my desktop and typed a single line, 1 pillar down. My job was safe. My income was secure. The threat of immediate destitution, the lever Gordon had tried to pull to force me back into submission, had snapped off in his hand. But I did not smile. I did not pump my fist in the air. This was just defense. Now, I had to switch to offense. Gordon had mentioned witnesses. He had built his power on the perception of the extended family. He needed them to see him as the benevolent king and me as the ungrateful rebel. He needed their money to keep his Ponzi scheme afloat, and he needed their silence to keep his reputation intact. He had turned them against me with a lie. I was going to turn them back with the truth. I opened the spreadsheet I had compiled the night before. I looked at the list of names. Martha Jennings, Jonah Hart, Lucas Miller, Sarah Miller, Robert Hart. These were not just names. These were people who had held me when I was a baby. People who had sent me graduation cards. People who, largely, were decent, trusting folks who had been manipulated by a man they thought they knew. I needed to warn them, but I could not just send a mass email. That would look like a frantic rant. That would look exactly like the unstable behavior Gordon had warned them about. If I screamed fraud, they would cover their ears. I had to be surgical. I scanned the list, looking for the weak link. I needed someone who was smart enough to understand the numbers but distant enough from Gordon's inner circle to listen. My eyes landed on Jonah Hart. My uncle Jonah, my mother's younger brother, he was a quiet man, a retired engineer who lived in a modest house 2 towns over. He never got involved in the family drama. At the party last night, he had been sitting near the back, watching quietly while everyone else whispered. I checked the records I had downloaded. Jonah had transferred $25,000 to the trust 6 months ago. The memo said, "College fund for grandkids." I checked the outflow. 2 days after Jonah's deposit, $25,000 had been wired to a luxury resort in the Maldives. The memo on that transfer was consulting retreat. I pulled up the photos from Brielle's social media from 6 months ago. She was in the Maldives. She had captioned the photo, "Treating myself because I earned it." She had spent Jonah's grandkids' college money on a tan. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but I tamped it down. Anger was fuel, but it had to be refined before it could be used. I did not call Jonah, not yet. A phone call could be dismissed. A phone call was just words. I opened a new document. I began to draft a dossier. I did not write a letter. I created a report. Subject: discrepancy analysis regarding investment account ending in 4098. Date: current. To Jonah Hart. From Natalie Hart, Senior Risk Analyst. I attached the screenshot of his deposit. I attached the screenshot of the withdrawal. I attached the screenshot of Brielle's Instagram post. I connected the dots with red lines, metaphorically speaking. No emotion, no accusations like they stole your money, just data. Fact A: you deposited funds on this date. Fact B: funds were moved to an operating account on this date. Fact C: funds were expended on a non-investment transaction on this date. Conclusion: please verify if this expenditure aligns with your investment goals. I saved the file as a PDF. I did not send it. I needed to deliver this in a way that Gordon could not intercept, and in a way that Brielle could not spin. I looked at the rest of the list. I would need to do this for everyone, but Jonah was the key. If I could turn Jonah, if I could get the quiet, logical engineer to ask a question, the rest of the dominoes would start to wobble. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the hum of my refrigerator. Gordon was probably at home right now, drinking scotch, telling my mother that he had done the hard thing, but the right thing. He probably thought I was crying in my apartment. staring at a blank wall, terrified of the future. He was right about one thing. I was staring at a wall. But it was not blank. It was covered in the invisible blueprints of his destruction. I opened my eyes. I picked up my phone. I saw a missed text from Brielle. Brielle, Mom is really upset. Hope you are happy. I typed a reply, my thumbs moving steady and sure. Natalie, I am actually very busy. I will be in touch. I hit send. Then I went back to the dossier. I had a lot of work to do before Monday morning. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a knock on my door. It was not the polite, rhythmic rap of a delivery driver, nor was it the hesitant tap of a neighbor borrowing sugar. It was a heavy, irregular pounding, the sound of a fist hitting wood with a mixture of entitlement and panic. I was sitting on my couch, a cup of tea in my hand, reviewing the final page of the dossier I had prepared for Uncle Jonah. I did not jump. I did not spill my tea. I had been expecting this since I hung up the phone with Elena Vance 5 hours ago. I set the tea down on a coaster. I walked to the door. I checked the peephole. Gordon Hart was standing in my hallway. The man who had stood in the center of the dining room last night, looking like a silver-haired titan of industry, was gone. In his place was a man whose expensive polo shirt was buttoned wrong at the collar. His face was flushed a blotchy, unhealthy red, and there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead that the air conditioning of the hallway could not combat. He looked like a man who had just realized the brakes on his car had been cut while he was doing 80 on the highway. I unlocked the deadbolt. The click was loud in the quiet hallway. I opened the door, but I did not step back. I stood in the threshold, blocking the entrance. Gordon did not say hello. He did not ask if he could come in. "Fix it," he snapped. His voice was a harsh whisper, mindful of the neighbors but unable to contain his fury. "You need to call your company right now and fix it." I looked at him calmly. "Fix what exactly?" "Do not play games with me." "Natalie," he hissed, stepping closer. I could smell stale coffee and fear on his breath. "Marcus called me. He is being investigated. They locked him out of the building. He said you reported him." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "I reported a policy violation," I said, keeping my tone mild. "A manager disclosed confidential personnel information to non-employees in a public setting. That is a liability. I did what any good risk analyst would do. I mitigated the risk." "You embarrassed him." Gordon's voice rose, cracking slightly. "You embarrassed me. Do you have any idea the strings I pulled to get him there? Do you know how bad this looks? It looks like you tried to use my career as a prop in your theater production," I said, "and now the curtain has fallen on your head." Gordon opened his mouth to shout, but then he seemed to remember where he was. He looked down the hallway, checking for eavesdroppers. When he looked back at me, the aggression had faltered, replaced by a desperate, frantic urgency. "Natalie, listen to me. You are making a mistake. You are escalating this into something it does not need to be. Just call them. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them it was a skit, a joke, anything." I stared at him. He truly believed he could rewrite reality just by demanding it. "No," I said. Movement behind him caught my eye. Brielle stepped out from the blind spot near the stairwell. If Gordon looked disheveled, Brielle looked haunted. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a hoodie, trying to look invisible. She was not the glowing emerald princess of last night. She was a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. She did not look at me with hate. She looked at me with terror. "Natalie," she said, her voice small and trembling, Did you tell anyone else?" I looked at my sister. The question hung in the air, heavy and specific. She was not asking about Northline. She was asking about the money. She was asking about the secrets. "Tell them what?" I asked, testing the waters. "You know," she whispered, "about everything." Gordon waved a hand, silencing her. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, trying to summon the patriarch mask that had served him so well for 30 years. "Look," he said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial tone. "We got off on the wrong foot last night. Emotions were high. It was a birthday. and expectations were not met. I admit. The invoice. That was perhaps too harsh. A dramatic gesture to make a point. A dramatic gesture, I repeated. Charging me $200,000 was a gesture. Gordon forced a smile. It looked painful. I am willing to make it go away, he said. I brought the car key. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the fob to my Honda. He held it out like a treat for a dog. Take it. It is yours. I will sign the title over today. No debt. We forget the invoice. We forget the money. You just drop this thing at work, and we go back to normal. Normal, I said. You mean the normal where you steal my car and then give it back to buy my silence? I am trying to be generous, Gordon snapped, his patience fraying. Do you want the car or not? I looked at the key, then I looked at him. I do not want the car, Dad, and I do not care about the invoice. Gordon froze. His eyes narrowed. Then what do you want? An apology? Is that it? Fine. I am sorry. I am sorry we made a scene. There. Are you happy? I shook my head slowly. It was almost tragic how little he understood. You think this is about my feelings, I said. You think I am doing this because you hurt me. Isn't it? Brielle asked, stepping forward. You are mad because we embarrassed you. I looked at her, then back at Gordon. I am not mad, I said. I am done. And I am not doing this for me. I am doing it for Aunt Martha, and Uncle Jonah, and the Millers. Gordon went still. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like a plug had been pulled. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. I know, Dad, I said softly. Gordon swallowed hard. You do not know anything. You are guessing. I took a step forward, lowering my voice so only they could hear. I know about the transfer of $25,000 from Uncle Jonah on February 12th, I recited, my voice steady as a metronome. I know about the wire transfer to the luxury resort in the Maldives on February 14th. I know the memo read consulting retreat, but the pictures on Brielle's private Instagram showed a beach cabana and bottle service. Brielle let out a small, strangled sound. She grabbed Gordon's arm. I know about Aunt Martha's retirement fund, I continued. Relentless. $50,000 deposited. $4,000 a month going out to a leasing agency for a Porsche Macan that is parked in your garage. Brielle. Stop it, Gordon whispered. I know about the power of attorney forms. I said, I know about the witness signatures that were dated when Brielle was in California. That is fraud. Dad, that is forgery. Gordon looked like he was going to be sick. He put a hand on the wall to steady himself. The arrogance was completely gone now. He was just an old man who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Except the jar belonged to the FBI. How? He rasped. How do you have that? You asked me to manage the server. I reminded him. You told me to keep everything accessible. I did exactly what you asked. Gordon stared at me with a look of absolute horror. He realized then that he had not just handed me a gun. He had loaded it, aimed it at his own head, and then dared me to pull the trigger. Natalie, please, he said. His voice was broken. We can work this out. We can pay it back. I just need time. If you release this, if you tell them, it destroys everything. The family, the reputation, your sister. She could go to jail. Brielle began to cry. Soft, hiccuping sobs behind her sunglasses. I looked at them. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was distant, like watching a stranger trip on the sidewalk. You should have thought about that before you spent Uncle Jonah's retirement on a vacation, I said. Natalie! The sharp voice came from the stairwell. I looked past Gordon. My mother, Marianne, was coming up the stairs. She was out of breath, her face pinched and angry. She did not look at Gordon or Brielle. She looked straight at me. I stayed in the car, she said, marching up to the door. But I knew you would be difficult. Mom! Brielle sobbed. She knows about the accounts. Marianne stopped. She looked at Gordon, who was pale and shaking. Then she looked back at me. Her eyes did not hold shame. They held resentment. You ungrateful child, she spat. I blinked. Excuse me? Your father has worked his fingers to the bone for this family, she said, her voice trembling with indignation. He managed everyone's money. He took care of everyone. And sometimes you have to move things around to make it work. That is business. Stealing from your brother is not business. Mom, I said, it is a crime. It is only a crime if someone tells, she shouted, not caring about the neighbors anymore. Why do you have to be so destructive? We were happy. Everyone was happy. Why do you have to ruin the peace? I stared at her. For 32 years, I had thought my mother was a victim of Gordon's control. I thought she was the passive, silent flower arranger who just wanted everyone to get along. But standing there, with her husband cowering and her daughter crying, she was the one attacking. She knew. She had always known. She enjoyed the lifestyle the stolen money provided just as much as they did. She preferred a lie that kept her comfortable over a truth that made her responsible. She was not a victim. She was the accomplice. You are ruining this family, Marianne screamed. I looked at the three of them. My father, the fraud, my sister, the parasite, my mother, the enabler. They were a closed loop of toxicity, and for the first time in my life, I was completely outside of it. I am not ruining the family, I said quietly. I am saving what is left of it from you. I stepped back into my apartment. Gordon lunged forward, jamming his foot in the door. Natalie, wait. Do not send anything. We will give you whatever you want. Half the trust? Is that what you want? We will cut you in. Just do not send it. I looked down at his polished shoe blocking my door. Take your foot out of my house, Dad. Please, he begged. You have to understand. The world is hard. We did what we had to do to survive. I looked him in the eye. Last night, you stood in front of 100 people and told me that the world is transactional. I said, you told me that adults have to pay their debts. You gave me an invoice for my existence. Gordon's face crumbled. You taught me that actions have consequences, I said. I kicked his foot, hard. He yelped and pulled it back by reflex. I grabbed the door handle. I learned the lesson. Dad, I said, now it is your turn to pay the bill. I slammed the door in their faces. I threw the deadbolt. Click. I heard Marianne screaming my name through the wood. I heard Gordon pounding on the door again, a desperate, hollow thudding. I turned my back on the noise. I walked to my desk. The computer screen was still on. The email to Uncle Jonah was drafted. The file was attached. My hand hovered over the mouse. Outside, the pounding stopped, replaced by the sound of arguing, my mother blaming Gordon, Gordon blaming Brielle. I took a deep breath. Send. The dossier I sent to Uncle Jonah sat in the digital ether for exactly 11 minutes before my phone lit up. It was not a text, it was a call. I stared at the screen. Jonah Hart was a man who communicated primarily through birthday cards and polite nods at Thanksgiving. He was a retired structural engineer who treated conversation like he treated materials. Use only what is necessary to support the load, and cut the rest. In 32 years, I could not recall him ever calling me on the phone. I picked up on the third ring. Hello? Uncle Jonah, I said. There was no greeting, no pleasantries about the weather or the disaster of a party last night. Natalie, his voice came through low and grainy, stripped of any familial warmth. I am looking at page 4, the transfer to the offshore holding company. I sat up straighter. Yes. Are you sure? He asked. It was not a question of disbelief. It was a question of calibration. He was asking if I had checked my measurements. I did not speculate. Jonah, I replied, matching his clinical tone. I pulled the raw transaction logs from the server. I matched the routing number to a shell corporation registered in the Caymans. The beneficiary on the incorporation documents is listed as G.H. Holdings. I cross-referenced the IP address used to authorize the wire. It came from the desktop computer in Dad's home office. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the faint rhythmic clicking of a mouse. He was verifying it himself, likely cross-referencing against his own bank statements right then and there. And the dates? he asked. They align perfectly with the dates you were told the market was down. I said, you received a letter on March 3rd stating that the fund had taken a 5% hit due to volatility. On March 2nd, $40,000 was moved out of the principal and into a private account held by Brielle. The clicking stopped. I heard a heavy exhale, the sound of a man who had been holding his breath for a very long time. Meet me, he said. Where? There is a diner on 4th Street, the one with the neon sign. 45 minutes. Bring everything. He hung up. The diner was quiet, smelling of burnt coffee and floor wax. Jonah was sitting in a booth at the far back, away from the windows. He was wearing a beige windbreaker and reading glasses, looking every bit the harmless, aging uncle. But as I slid into the booth opposite him, I saw something in his eyes I had never noticed before. It was not sadness, it was calculation. He did not order food. He had a cup of black coffee in front of him, untouched. On the table, sitting next to the sugar dispenser, was a thick, weathered manila envelope. I placed my laptop bag on the seat next to me. Did you bring the drive? He asked. I nodded. It is encrypted. Good, he said. Keep it that way. He took a sip of his coffee, grimacing slightly at the temperature. You think you are the first one to find this, don't you? He asked quietly. I blinked, taken aback. I did the audit last night. I found the discrepancies. You found the proof, Jonah corrected. But the suspicion? That has been there for a long time. He tapped the manila envelope with a calloused finger. Your father is a charming man, Natalie. He sells a dream. The idea of the Hart Family Trust was seductive. We put our money in. He manages it. We all get rich together. It worked for a while, or at least, on paper it did. He opened the envelope and slid a stack of yellowed papers toward me. I looked at the top document. It was minutes from a family meeting 15 years ago. I saw my father's signature at the bottom, bold and sweeping. Look at Clause 14, Jonah said. I squinted at the fine print. The manager reserves the right to reallocate assets into high yield, private equity ventures at his sole discretion without prior notification to the principals. It sounds standard, I said. It is a loophole, Jonah said. It is a permission slip to move money into black holes. I asked him about it 10 years ago. He told me I was thinking like an engineer, not a visionary. He told me to trust the family. Jonah leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. People like to think that families are built on love. Natalie, they are not. They are built on silence. We all knew Gordon lived beyond his means. We saw the cars. We saw the trips. But as long as our statements showed a profit, no one wanted to rock the boat. No one wanted to be the one to accuse the patriarch of theft. He looked out the window at the gray parking lot. But then the dividends stopped coming, he said. 2 years ago, he started making excuses. The market, inflation, bad luck. I felt a chill run down my spine. That was exactly when Brielle had started her influencer career. That was when the Porsche appeared. Why didn't you do anything? I asked. Jonah looked at me with a sad, weary smile. We tried. He pulled another document from the stack. It was a letter from a law firm I did not recognize. 3 of us went to a lawyer last year. He said, me, your Aunt Martha, and Cousin Lucas, we wanted to audit the books. My jaw dropped. Aunt Martha? The woman who could barely remember where she put her glasses? Martha is sharper than you give her credit for, Jonah said. She knows to the penny what she is worth. We hired a forensic accountant. We tried to get access. And Gordon blocked us, Jonah said. He pulled out the signed agreements. He claimed the fund structure was proprietary. He claimed we had signed away our right to a third-party audit, without evidence of a crime, without a smoking gun. We were stuck. We could not sue our own brother based on a hunch. It would have torn the family apart for nothing. He looked at me, and his expression shifted. The sadness evaporated, replaced by the steel of a man who finally had the tool he needed to finish a job. But you, he said, you were inside. I realized then what I was looking at. I was not the lone hero of this story. I was the final piece of a puzzle they had been trying to solve for years. They needed the raw data. I whispered, they needed the transaction logs. We needed a whistleblower, Jonah said. We needed someone with admin access to bypass his firewalls and pull the actual bank routing numbers. We knew he was stealing. We just could not prove where the money was going. He pointed to my bag. You just gave us the map, Natalie. I sat back against the vinyl booth. My head was spinning. All this time, I thought I was the outcast. I thought I was the only one who saw through Gordon's facade. But the quiet ones, the ones sitting in the back of the room, had been watching him like hawks. They had just been waiting for ammunition. So what do we do? I asked. Do I send it to everyone? Do I post it online? Jonah's hand shot out and covered mine. His grip was surprisingly strong. No, he commanded. I looked at him, startled. You do not post this. Natalie, you do not put this on social media. You do not send a mass email that lets him spin a narrative about his crazy daughter attacking him. He withdrew his hand and folded his arms. If you make noise, he wins, Jonah said. He will claim it is a misunderstanding. He will hide the rest of the money. He will declare bankruptcy and shield the assets. He is good at that. Then what? We execute a silent coup, Jonah said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was heavy. Cream-colored stock. Sterling and Vance. Financial crimes litigation. We have the lawyers on retainer, Jonah said. We have been waiting for Exhibit A. You just provided it. He slid the card to me. Here is what is going to happen, he said, his voice taking on the cadence of a project manager laying out a construction schedule. You are going to give me a copy of that drive. Then, you are going to go home. You are not going to answer your father's calls. You are not going to answer Brielle's texts. You are going to be a ghost. And you? I asked. I am going to call a meeting, he said. Not a party. A meeting. Just the investors. The real ones. Martha, Lucas, the people whose money built that house you walked out of. He looked at me with a fierce intensity. We are going to freeze him. Natalie, we are going to petition the court for an emergency injunction tomorrow morning. By noon, his accounts will be locked. By 2 p.m, the forensic team will be in his office. He won't even know he has been hit until his card gets declined at lunch. I felt a surge of adrenaline. It was ruthless. It was cold. It was perfect. But I need you to promise me something, Jonah said, his voice softening slightly. What? This is not revenge, he said. I looked at him, confused. It feels like revenge. No, Jonah said firmly. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. This is correction. This is balancing the ledger. If you do this to hurt him, you will make mistakes. You will get sloppy. You have to do this because it is the only way to stop him from hurting anyone else. He looked at the invoice I had told him about, the one Gordon had given me. He tried to charge you for your life. Natalie, Jonah said, that was his mistake. He made it transactional. So we are going to treat him like a transaction, a bad one, and we are going to write him off. I nodded slowly. I understood. Gordon wanted to play business. We would give him business. I reached into my bag and pulled out the encrypted drive. I slid it across the table. The password is your birthday, I said. Jonah cracked a rare, small smile. He picked up the drive and slipped it into his pocket. Go home, Natalie, he said. Let the adults handle the rest. The phrase hung in the air. Let the adults handle the rest. For 32 years, Gordon had treated me like a child. He had told me I was incapable, dependent, and weak. He had told me I needed his permission to exist. Jonah was telling me something different. He was telling me that I had done my part. I had carried the payload. Now, the artillery was taking over. I stood up. I felt steady. The frantic energy of the morning had settled into a calm resolve. Thank you. Jonah, I said. He did not say you are welcome. He just nodded and returned his attention to his cold coffee. I walked out of the diner and into the afternoon sun. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I walked to the curb and hailed a cab. I was not going to hide. But I was not going to fight in the street, either. I was going to follow Jonah's advice. I was going to go silent. Because the scariest thing in the world isn't the person screaming at you. It is the person who stops screaming and starts writing things down. I got into the cab. West Haven, please, I told the driver. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the diner. Jonah was already on his phone. The manila envelope open in front of him. The machine was in motion. Gordon Hart had wanted a family dinner with 100 relatives to witness his power. He was about to get a very different kind of gathering, and this time, he wouldn't be sitting at the head of the table. He would be on the menu. The silence I had promised Uncle Jonah lasted exactly 14 hours. Monday morning broke over West Haven with a gray, persistent drizzle that matched the static in my head. I had turned off my phone notifications. But silence does not stop the world from burning. It just means you do not smell the smoke until the fire is under your door. When I finally logged into my personal email, the inbox was not empty. It was overflowing. Brielle had been busy. She had not attacked me directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she had launched a whisper campaign, a guerrilla war fought in the group chats and Facebook threads of our extended family. I saw screenshots forwarded by the few cousins who were too confused to pick a side yet. Natalie is having a breakdown. Brielle had written to Aunt Sarah. She hacked Dad's computer because she is jealous of the business. She is trying to blackmail us. To Cousin Mike, she had sent, "Be careful. Natalie stole a bunch of personal data. If she asks for money, do not give it to her. She is in trouble at work and trying to cover it up." It was a classic Darvo tactic. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. She was painting me as the unstable, vindictive sister, the hacker, the thief, the failure. She was inoculating the family against the truth. If I sent them proof of the fraud now, half of them would dismiss it as a desperate fabrication by the crazy daughter. I felt a spike of adrenaline, hot and sharp. I wanted to reply. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the bank statements right there in the comment section. But I remembered Jonah's voice. Revenge is emotional. Correction is precise. I closed the social media tab. I would not engage in a mud fight. I had a bigger weapon. But before I could even sip my coffee, my work laptop pinged. It was a sound I knew well. The distinct, urgent chime of a Priority 1 notification from the Northline internal system. My stomach dropped. I was supposed to be on paid administrative leave. Elena Vance had told me to take the day off. Priority 1 alerts were reserved for active data breaches or imminent security threats. I opened the laptop. An email from the Office of Corporate Compliance sat at the top of my inbox. Subject: Notice of suspension pending investigation. Reference case 9902. My hands went cold. I opened the email. Ms. Hart, at 800 hours this morning, Northline Integrity Solutions received an anonymous tip regarding a severe breach of your non-disclosure agreement. Attached is photographic evidence suggesting you have attempted to sell proprietary client risk assessments to a third-party competitor. Your access is hereby suspended. Please join the secure video conference link below immediately for a preliminary hearing. I stared at the screen. The room seemed to tilt. Selling data? It was insane. It was the one thing a risk analyst never, ever did. It was career suicide. It was a felony. I clicked the link. Elena Vance appeared on the screen. She was not the sympathetic ally she had been yesterday. Her face was set in stone. Next to her was a man I did not recognize. Someone from legal, likely. Natalie, Elena said. Her voice was stripped of all warmth. I did not do this, I said immediately. Elena did not blink. We received an email 40 minutes ago from an encrypted address. It contained 3 screenshots. She shared her screen. I leaned in, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The images showed a chat window. In the chat, a user named Nat H. Risk was negotiating a price, $50,000, for a file named Client List Q3.XLSX. The interface looked like a standard encrypted messaging app. The user handle was a variation of my actual username. To an outsider, It looked damning. It looked like I was selling out the company to cover the debts my father had so publicly announced I owed. "This is a fabrication," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Look at the timestamps." "The timestamps are from last night," Elena said, 11:30 p.m. I was asleep. I said, "That is not a defense." The lawyer spoke up. His voice was dry, bored. I looked closer at the screenshot. It was high resolution, too high. It was not a screen capture from a phone. It was a photo taken of a computer monitor. You could see the moire pattern, the wavy lines that appear when you take a picture of a screen with a camera. And then I saw it. In the reflection of the monitor, visible only in the dark corner of the screen where the chat window background was black, was a faint, ghostly shape. It was a reflection of the room where the computer sat. I saw the edge of a bookshelf, and on that bookshelf, a distinct porcelain figurine of a shepherdess. I stopped breathing for a second. I knew that shepherdess. I had broken its arm when I was 7 years old. My mother had glued it back together, leaving a jagged white scar on the blue ceramic. That computer was not in a hacker's basement. It was in the den of the Hart family home in Stonebridge. "I need the metadata," I said. Elena frowned. "What?" "The email you received," I said, speaking fast. "The sender used an anonymous service, right? Proton Mail or something similar?" "Yes," the lawyer said. "It is untraceable." "Nothing is untraceable if you are sloppy," I snapped. "Send me the raw image files attached to the email, not the PDF summary, the actual JPEGs." "Natalie, this is serious," Elena warned. "We are talking about federal charges." "I know," I shouted, then lowered my voice. "I know. That is why I need the files. Elena, you know me. You know my work. If I was going to sell data, would I be stupid enough to take a picture of my own screen? Please, give me 2 minutes." Elena looked at the lawyer. He shrugged, indifferent. She sent the files. I downloaded them. I did not open them in a photo viewer. I opened them in a hex editor, a tool that displays the raw code behind a file. I scrolled through the gibberish of numbers and letters, looking for the EXIF data, the digital fingerprint every camera leaves behind. Most smart people scrub this data. Brielle was not smart. She was arrogant. There it was. Make, Apple, Dell, iPhone 14 Pro, software, iOS 16.1. That proved nothing. Millions of people had iPhones. I went deeper. I looked at the software used to edit the image before it was sent. Adobe Photoshop Express. And then, the smoking gun. The author tag and the edited file metadata. User, Brielle H. Marketing. I let out a breath I felt I had been holding since I was 12. She had taken the photo, edited the contrast on her phone to make it look scarier, and in doing so, she had stamped her name on the murder weapon. But I needed more. I needed to link it to the location. I looked at the header of the email itself. The lawyer was right. The sender IP was masked by a VPN. It showed the location as Switzerland. But Brielle had made a classic amateur mistake. She had sent the email from a mail client installed on the desktop, not a web browser. And the desktop computer in my parents' den was old. It was still running a legacy version of Outlook that had a known bug. It sometimes leaked the local machine's MAC address in the message ID field, even when routed through a VPN. I found the string, 0, 14, 22, 01, 23, 45. I pulled up my own records, the system audit I had done for my father 3 years ago. I searched for that MAC address. Device name, Hart Family Desktop. Location, 442. Oak Lane. Stonebridge. IL. I took a screenshot of the hex code. I took a screenshot of the metadata. I took a screenshot of my old audit log. I compiled them into a single PDF. I sent it back to the video call chat. "Look at the author tag on the image," I said, my voice cold as ice, "and look at the device ID." I watched Elena's face. She squinted at the screen. Then her eyes went wide. "Brielle H. Marketing," she read aloud. The lawyer leaned in. Is that your sister?" "Yes," I said. And the device ID matches the desktop computer in my parents' house, the computer I have not touched in 6 months. I paused, letting the weight of it sink in. Someone created a fake chat interface, took a photo of it in my parents' house, edited it on my sister's phone, and sent it to you to get me fired. This is not a data breach. Elena, this is a framing. The lawyer sat back. He let out a low whistle. Well, he said, that changes the liability profile significantly. Elena looked furious, not at me, at the situation. She tried to weaponize our compliance department. She whispered, I am sorry. Elena, I said, they are desperate. They know I found the financial discrepancies, and they are trying to discredit me before I can expose them. They want to starve me out. Elena typed furiously on her keyboard. I am clearing this, she said. The suspension is lifted, immediately. And Natalie? Yes? Legal is going to draft a cease and desist letter to the individual owning that email address, regarding tortious interference with an employment contract. I nodded. Thank you. I closed the video call. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, my hands shaking, not from fear anymore, but from rage. This was closer than I wanted to admit. If I had not known about the legacy Outlook bug, if Brielle had used a different app to edit the photo, I would be unemployed right now. I would be facing a lawsuit. I would be unhireable in my field. Brielle had not just tried to hurt me, she had tried to kill my future. She did not care about the truth. She did not care about the law. She just wanted to exhaust me. She wanted me to be so busy fighting for my survival that I would drop the investigation into the money. It was a tactic of attrition. But attrition only works if the other side gets tired. I was not tired. I was wide awake. I picked up the PDF I had just shown Elena, the proof of the forgery, the metadata, the clumsiness of the attack. I opened a new email draft. I addressed it to Uncle Jonah. But then I added more names. I added Aunt Martha. I added Cousin Lucas. I added the 3 other relatives Jonah had mentioned in the diner. Subject: regarding the rumors of data theft. I did not write a long, emotional defense. I did not call Brielle names. I simply wrote, You may have heard rumors today that I have been terminated for unethical behavior. Please find attached the forensic analysis conducted by Northline Integrity Solutions, Security Division this morning. Summary: the incriminating evidence was fabricated on a computer located at the residence of Gordon and Marianne Hart, created by a user identified as Brielle Hart. This is the length they will go to in order to stop the audit. We are on the right track. I hit send. I sat back. I had just escalated the war. I had taken their dirty laundry and hung it up in the town square. By sending this to the group, I had done 2 things. First, I had inoculated myself against their lies. Whatever they said now would be viewed through the lens of this deception. Second, and more importantly, I had shown the family that Gordon and Brielle were terrified. Innocent people do not frame their relatives with Photoshop. Innocent people do not try to destroy careers. Panic is a smell. And now, thanks to Brielle's stupidity, the whole family could smell it. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jonah. Received. Martha is reading it now. She is furious. Stay safe. I looked at the screen. Stay safe. He knew. He knew that when a narcissist is cornered, when their mask is ripped off, that is when they are most dangerous. I went to my front door. I checked the lock. I wedged a chair under the handle, just like I used to do in my bedroom when I was a teenager, and Gordon was in one of his moods. I went back to my desk. I had survived the morning. I had survived the ambush. Now, it was time to close the trap. The meeting did not happen at the Hart family estate. It did not happen at a restaurant where eavesdroppers might linger. It took place in a rented conference room at the Courtyard Marriott on the edge of town, a space that smelled of lemon furniture polish and industrial carpet cleaner. There were no flowers. There was no buffet. There was only a long laminate table, 12 chairs, and a projector screen that I had set up 10 minutes before anyone arrived. Uncle Jonah stood at the door, acting as a grim bouncer. He checked phones as people entered, asking them to turn them off and place them in a basket by the entrance. It was a paranoid measure, perhaps, but after Brielle's digital forgery attempt yesterday, paranoia had become our standard operating procedure. 12 people sat around the table. These were the heavy hitters, the relatives whose combined contributions made up nearly 70% of the capital in the Hart Family Trust. There was Aunt Martha, clutching her purse like a shield. There was Cousin Lucas, a contractor who had invested his entire profit margin from last year. There was Uncle Robert, Gordon's older brother, who sat with his arms crossed, looking at me with a mixture of skepticism and disappointment. There was Aunt Sarah, who had practically raised me when Mom was having her spells. I stood at the head of the table. I was not wearing my party dress. I was wearing my charcoal work suit, my hair pulled back in a tight bun. I was not Natalie the niece. I was Natalie the senior risk analyst. "Thank you for coming," Jonah said, his voice low and gravelly. "We are here to look at the books. Natalie will walk you through the data." Uncle Robert scoffed. "Is this necessary? Jonah? Dragging us out here behind Gordon's back? The man has doubled our money in 10 years. If there is a dip in the market, we ride it out. We do not form a firing squad." I did not respond to the emotion in his voice. I clicked the remote in my hand. The projector hummed to life. A spreadsheet appeared on the screen. "I am not here to discuss the market. Uncle Robert," I said, my voice steady, "I am here to discuss allocation." I pointed the laser at a line item dated October 14th. "This is a deposit of $50,000 from Aunt Martha." I said, "The memo reads, long-term healthcare bond." Martha nodded, adjusting her glasses. "Yes, Gordon said it would yield 6%, tax deferred, for when I need assisted living." I clicked the slide. "This is a wire transfer from the trust's operating account, dated October 16th. I said, 48 hours later, amount, $45,000. Recipient, Prestige Motorcars of Chicago." The room went silent. I clicked again. A side-by-side comparison appeared. On the left, the bank transfer. On the right, a photo from Brielle's public Facebook page, dated October 17th. She was leaning against a white Porsche Macan, holding a giant red bow. The caption read, "Birthday treat to myself. Boss babe." I looked at Aunt Martha. "Martha, did you authorize the purchase of a luxury SUV for Brielle?" Martha's mouth opened, then closed. Her hands began to tremble. "No," she whispered. That is my nursing home money." I clicked to the next slide. "Cousin Lucas," I said, "you deposited $30,000 in January for the real estate expansion fund." Lucas nodded slowly, his eyes glued to the screen. "Here is the outflow." I said, "January 25th, $30,000 wired to Vantage PR, a reputation management firm." I pulled up the invoice from Vantage. The line items were clear: social media verification service, follower growth package, and press release distribution for B. Hart. "You paid for Brielle to get a blue checkmark and bought followers on Instagram." "Lucas," I said. The room shifted. The atmosphere changed from skepticism to a cold, horrified realization. It was one thing to hear rumors. It was another thing entirely to see your own hard-earned dollars transformed into vanity projects for a 26-year-old influencer. "But Gordon is the trustee," Uncle Robert blurted out. Though his voice lacked its earlier conviction, "He has the right to move assets. Maybe these are loans. Maybe she is paying interest." I anticipated that. I said, "I pulled up the loan repayment schedule for the trust." I searched for Brielle Hart. 0 results found. "There are no loan agreements," I said. "There are no repayment terms. These are classified in the ledger as operating expenses, which means, legally, they are gifts. Gifts bought with your money." I spent the next 20 minutes dissecting the body. I showed them the vacations disguised as site surveys. I showed them the designer wardrobe listed as uniform costs. I showed them the shell company in the Caymans that was slowly draining the liquidity dry. When I turned off the projector, the room was quiet. It was the silence of a funeral. Uncle Robert was staring at his hands. Aunt Martha was weeping silently, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "It is not just the money," Aunt Sarah said softly. Her voice broke the silence like glass. We all looked at her. "He looked me in the eye," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He sat at my kitchen table, drank my coffee, and told me he was worried about my future. He told me he wanted to protect me." She looked at the blank screen. He was not protecting me. He was harvesting me. The betrayal hung heavy in the air. Gordon had not just stolen cash. He had weaponized their trust. He had used his position as the successful brother to prey on their insecurities. Then, from the corner of the room, a voice spoke up. It was Cousin Beatrice, a quiet woman who worked as a librarian. "He made me sign," she whispered. I turned to her. "What did you say, B?" "He made me sign the power of attorney," Beatrice said. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. "2 years ago, I wanted to pull my money out. I needed it for my husband's surgery." She looked up, her eyes wide with a lingering fear. "Gordon told me that if I withdrew, I was out of the family. He said the trust was an all-or-nothing pact. He said if I showed lack of faith, he would make sure no one in the family spoke to me again. He said I would end up like—" She stopped, looking at me. "Like me?" I asked gently. Beatrice nodded. "Like the black sheep. I was scared. So I signed, and I let him keep the money." A murmur of shock went through the room. "He told me the same thing," Lucas said, his voice dropping. "He said loyalty pays dividends, and disloyalty costs everything." I looked at Jonah. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. This was the twist. We had thought Gordon was just a charmer. We realized now he was an extortionist. He had been holding the family hostage with the threat of exile for years. My public disowning at the party wasn't a new tactic. It was just the first time he had done it in front of an audience. Jonah stood up. He did not look like a retired engineer anymore. He looked like a general. "We are done being hostages," Jonah said. He placed a document on the table. "This is a petition for an emergency injunction," he explained. "It freezes all assets in the Hart Family Trust, pending a forensic audit. It removes Gordon Hart as the trustee and appoints an independent fiduciary." He looked around the table. "We need a majority vote to file this." Uncle Robert stood up slowly. He looked older than he had an hour ago. He walked over to the table, picked up the pen, and signed his name. "For the family," Robert said, his voice thick. "The real family." One by one, they stood up. Martha signed. Lucas signed. Beatrice signed. It was not a rebellion. It was a correction. They were taking back their agency. When the last signature was dry, Jonah looked at me. "You do not sign." "Natalie," he said. "I know," I replied. "You are the technical witness." He told the room, "If this goes to court, Natalie is simply the analyst who uncovered the error. She is not the ringleader. We are the ringleader. This protects her from being countersued for malice." It was a brilliant strategic move. By keeping my name off the petition, they were shielding me. I wasn't the daughter seeking revenge. I was just the flashlight they had used to see the roaches. Jonah gathered the papers. "I am taking this to the judge within the hour," he said. "By 2 o'clock, Gordon's credit cards will stop working. By 3 o'clock, the bank will lock the accounts." The meeting dispersed quietly. There were no hugs, no cheers, just the grim nods of people who had just authorized a controlled demolition of their own history. I walked out to the parking lot. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy and humid. I unlocked my phone. It began to ring immediately. The name on the screen was Dad. I stared at it. I could let it go to voicemail. I could block him. But Jonah had said, "Let the adults handle it," and I was an adult. I slid the icon to answer. "Hello? Gordon?" I said. There was no greeting, just a sound of pure, unadulterated rage, a guttural noise that sounded like an animal caught in a trap. "You traitor," he hissed. I stopped walking. I leaned against a concrete pillar. "Robert just called me," Gordon spat. "He told me what you did. He told me you turned them all." I did not turn anyone, I said calmly. The truth turned them. I just showed them the slides. You have no idea what you have done, he screamed. You have humiliated me. You have destroyed this family. There will be nothing left. There will be plenty left, I said. It just won't be in your pocket anymore. He was breathing hard, ragged gasps. I could hear the panic rising, the realization that his charm, his threats, his invoices, none of it worked anymore. You listen to me. Natalie, he said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. If you think you can walk away from this, you are wrong. I will ruin you. I will make sure you never work in this town again. You will not have a friend, a job, or a home. You will have no place in this world. I looked out across the parking lot. I saw Aunt Martha getting into her car, helped by Cousin Lucas. I saw Uncle Jonah pulling out of the lot, heading toward the courthouse with the signed petition. I saw a group of people who had finally stopped being afraid. And I realized I wasn't afraid either. You are wrong. Dad, I said softly. What? He snapped. You said I won't have a place, I said, but you are wrong. I stood up straight, adjusting my blazer. I just got my place back, I said. I hung up the phone. I did not block the number. I simply put the phone back in my pocket. I walked to the curb to call a cab. The sky was still gray, but for the first time in 32 years, the forecast looked entirely clear. The storm had broken. Now, all that was left was to wash away the debris. The sun had set hours ago, but I was wide awake, fueled by the cold precision of a job that was almost finished. My apartment was dark, lit only by the glow of my laptop screen and the streetlights filtering through the blinds. I knew my father. I knew Gordon Hart better than he knew himself. Most people would assume that after the phone call in the parking lot, after realizing the family had turned against him, he would surrender. He would call a lawyer, cut a deal, and try to salvage what was left of his retirement. But Gordon was not most people. He was a narcissist who had been rewriting reality for 30 years. He would not see the petition for an injunction as a defeat. He would see it as a challenge. He would spend tonight trying to move money, hide assets, or manufacture evidence to paint me as the villain. He would try to burn the house down rather than let anyone else hold the keys. He needed to be stopped before he could light the match. I picked up my phone and dialed Jonah. Is it done? I asked. The lawyer is filing the emergency motion at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Jonah said. His voice was tired but steady. But that leaves a gap. If he has offshore access, he can move funds tonight. I know. I said, that is why we are not waiting for the judge. We are going to trigger the bank's internal immune system. I had already drafted the letters. They were not court orders. They were notifications of suspicious activity, citing the specific regulations regarding elder financial abuse and wire fraud. Send the letters to the compliance officers at his primary banks. I told Jonah, attach the affidavit from Aunt Martha stating she never authorized the Porsche purchase. Will they freeze him without a court order? Jonah asked. They will not freeze him, I explained, but they will flag him. If he tries to move anything over $10,000 tonight, the system will trigger a manual review. It will stall him. It will buy us the night. Do it, Jonah said. And Natalie? Yes? Be careful. A rat is most dangerous when it knows the trap is shut. I hung up and sent the emails. I watched the progress bar complete. Sent. I imagined Gordon sitting in his study, logging into his accounts, his hands shaking as he tried to transfer funds to the Cayman Shell Company, only to see a pending review notification pop up. I imagined the color draining from his face. But I could not rely on the banks alone. I needed to be ready for the final confrontation. Gordon would demand a meeting. It was his pattern. When he lost control of the narrative, he always tried to regain it by gathering an audience. He believed his own charisma was a law of physics, that if he could just look people in the eye and speak in his rich baritone voice, they would forget the facts and believe the fable. He would call a peace summit. He would invite the family, and he would try to put me on trial one last time. I needed to be ready to prosecute. I opened a fresh presentation file. I did not use a fancy template. I chose a stark white background with black text. No animations, no transitions. I limited myself to 12 slides. 12 pages to dismantle a lifetime of lies. Slide 1. The Promise. A scan of the Trust's mission statement, signed by Gordon, promising preservation of capital. Slide 2. The Reality. A graph showing the inverse relationship between the family's deposits and Gordon's personal spending. Slide 3. The Theft. The Porsche, the jet, the PR firm. I worked with the detachment of a coroner. I was not writing a story. I was conducting an autopsy. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at it. A text message from Brielle. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore her. She was the one who had tried to frame me with a Photoshop chat log just hours ago. She was the one who had tried to destroy my career to save her own skin. But curiosity is a powerful thing. I picked up the phone. Brielle. Please, just tell us what you want. We can work out a payment plan. Just stop the emails to the family. Don't make Mom and Dad lose face like this. It is killing them. I stared at the words. Don't make Mom and Dad lose face. Even now, standing on the edge of the abyss, with prison time a very real possibility. Brielle was not worried about the morality of what they had done. She was not worried about Aunt Martha losing her nursing home money. She was worried about the optics. She was worried about embarrassment. They truly believed that looking good was the same thing as being good. I did not reply. Instead, I took a screenshot of the message. I added it to the presentation. Slide 11. The Motive. I was about to close the laptop when a thought struck me, a nagging, persistent itch in the back of my brain. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope Gordon had thrown at me during the birthday dinner. The envelope that had started this entire war. I pulled out the invoice. Cost of upbringing and maintenance. Natalie Hart. Total, $246,700. I smoothed the paper out on my desk. I had looked at this document a dozen times, fueled by anger, but I had never looked at it as an analyst. I had never cross-referenced it with the data I had stolen from the server. I ran a finger down the line items. Orthodontic correction. Age 12, $6,200. I turned back to my laptop. I opened the archive of the family ledger from 20 years ago. I searched for checks written in that year. I found it. Check number 402, dated August, 20 years ago. Amount, $6,200. Payee, Dr. Henderson, orthodontist. But the check was not drawn on Gordon's personal account. It was drawn on a joint account named Hart Family Education Fund. And the deposit that funded that check? It was a personal check from Aunt Martha. Memo line, for Nat's teeth. Keep smiling. Honey. My breath hitched. I typed in the next item. State University tuition assistance, $18,000. I searched the ledger. Wire transfer. Source, Jonah Hart. Destination, University bursar. I sat back, feeling the room spin. Gordon had not paid for these things. He had not paid for my braces. He had not paid for my college. He had not paid for the summer camps or the medical bills. The extended family had paid for them. Aunt Martha, Uncle Jonah, Cousin Lucas. They had all chipped in over the years, funneling money through Gordon, trusting him to manage the expenses of the struggling young family. Gordon had taken their money, paid my bills, and taken the credit. And now? Now he was presenting me with an invoice, demanding I pay him back for money they had given me. He was double-dipping on my existence. He had stolen from them to raise me, and now he was trying to steal from me to pay them back for what he had stolen. It was a Ouroboros of fraud. It was so audacious, so completely devoid of conscience, that I almost had to admire the sheer scale of the evil. I looked at the invoice again. It was no longer just a cruel joke. It was a confession. It was a paper trail proving that he had been misappropriating funds for decades, using me as the excuse. I picked up my phone. I texted Brielle back. Natalie, you want to save face? Fine. Tell Dad I will meet him. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. The house. The reply came instantly, 3 dancing dots, then the text. Brielle. Really? You will come? We can settle this? Natalie. Yes. Invite everyone. The aunts, the uncles. If we are going to settle the account, everyone needs to be there to sign off. Brielle. Okay. Thank you. Natalie. Thank you. We will fix this. I put the phone down. She thought I was surrendering. She thought I was coming back to the fold, ready to apologize and accept some quiet payoff to keep the family secrets buried. She thought the audience would be there to pressure me into silence, just like at the birthday party. She was wrong. I was not bringing an apology. I was bringing the invoice. I spent the rest of the night refining the 12 slides. I printed them out. I placed them in a binder. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The rain had started again, washing the streets clean. I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like Gordon Hart's daughter. I did not feel like the black sheep or the disappointment or the investment that failed to yield a return. I was the auditor, and tomorrow night, I was going to close the books. I packed my bag, the laptop, the binder, the invoice. I went to bed, but I did not sleep deeply. I lay awake, rehearsing the lines, not for drama, but for accuracy. Item 1. Item 2. Item 3. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not let them see me sweat. Gordon had taught me that emotions were a weakness. He had taught me that only the bottom line mattered. Tomorrow, I would show him exactly how well I had learned that lesson. I closed my eyes and waited for the dawn of the final day. The driveway was just as crowded as it had been on my birthday, but the energy was different. 4 nights ago, the air had been thick with anticipation, the buzz of a party about to begin. Tonight, the air was static, heavy and suffocating, like the pressure drop before a tornado touches down. I parked my rental car 2 blocks away. I did not want my vehicle blocked in. I walked the rest of the way, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the pavement. I was wearing a simple black blouse and gray trousers, the kind of outfit I wore to quarterly reviews. I carried nothing but a slim leather portfolio tucked under my arm. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside. The foyer was full. Gordon had summoned the cavalry. Almost everyone who had been there for the birthday dinner was present. Aunt Martha, Cousin Lucas, Uncle Robert, and dozens of others. They were standing in clusters, holding drinks, but nobody was laughing. They were whispering, their eyes darting toward the dining room where Gordon held court. When I walked in, the whispering stopped. It traveled across the room like a wave, silence following in my wake. Gordon was standing by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantelpiece, exactly where he had stood when he disowned me. Marianne was seated in an armchair nearby, looking pale and fragile, clutching a handkerchief. Brielle stood behind her father, her arms crossed, her eyes hidden behind oversized glasses even though we were indoors. Natalie, Gordon said. His voice was warm, projected to reach the back of the room. He opened his arms as if to embrace a prodigal daughter. I am glad you came. I knew you would see reason. I did not smile. I did not step forward to hug him. I walked to the center of the room, stopping with the heavy oak dining table between us. Everyone, please, gather round, Gordon announced, gesturing to the relatives. We are here to put an ugly chapter behind us. My daughter and I have had our differences. There were harsh words. There were misunderstandings regarding family finances. But the Hart family does not break. We forgive. He looked at me, his eyes hardening slightly while his smile remained fixed. I am willing to withdraw the invoice. Natalie, he said, acting the part of the benevolent king. We will forget the debt. We will forget the unpleasantness at your office. All we ask is that you apologize to your sister and your mother for the stress you have caused, and we can move forward. The room held its breath. They were waiting for my submission. This was the script. The rebellious child bows down, the patriarch grants mercy, and the status quo is preserved. I placed my leather portfolio on the table. I appreciate the offer. Dad, I said. My voice was calm, clear, and loud enough to be heard in the kitchen. But I am not here to apologize, and I am not here to be forgiven. Gordon's smile faltered. Natalie, do not make a scene. We have guests. I asked for 3 minutes. I said, that was the agreement. I opened the portfolio. I took out the invoice, the original one he had given me on my birthday. I smoothed it out on the table. 4 days ago, you gave me this bill. I said, looking around the room, you told everyone here that I cost $246,700. You said I was a bad investment. Brielle shifted uncomfortably. Gordon took a step forward. That is in the past, Natalie. But details matter. I interrupted. In my line of work, we check the line items. So I did. I picked up the invoice and read from it. Item number 4. Orthodontic correction. Age 12. $6,200. I looked at Aunt Martha, who was standing near the window. Aunt Martha, do you remember the summer I got braces? Martha blinked, surprised to be addressed. Yes, I remember you were so embarrassed to smile. I pulled a document from my portfolio and placed it next to the invoice. This is a copy of a check dated August, 20 years ago. I said, it is written to Dr. Henderson. It is signed by Gordon Hart. But the funds used to cover this check came from a deposit made 3 days prior. I looked at Martha. The deposit was from you, Martha. The memo line read, for Nat's teeth. The room went deadly silent. Gordon's face turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. That is irrelevant, he snapped. Money is fungible. It all goes into the family pot. Item number 7, I continued, ignoring him. University tuition, $18,000. I looked at Uncle Jonah. You wired this money. Jonah, you told me it was a graduation gift, but Dad listed it here as a loan from him to me. I looked back at Gordon. You took their money to pay for my life, and now you are asking me to pay you back for it. You are charging me for the charity of others. A murmur rippled through the room. It was not the sound of gossip this time. It was the sound of anger. This is nonsense, Gordon shouted, slamming his hand on the mantelpiece. She is twisting numbers. She is confused. I am not confused, I said, and neither are the bank records. I walked over to the large flat-screen television mounted on the wall. I pulled an HDMI cable from my bag and plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered to life. I have prepared 12 slides, I said. Gordon lunged forward. Turn that off! You have no right! Jonah stepped out from the crowd. He moved faster than I expected for a man of his age. He stood between Gordon and me, blocking his path. Let her speak. Gordon, Jonah said. His voice was low, dangerous. You have been doing all the talking for 30 years. Gordon stopped. He looked at Jonah, then at the other men in the room. He saw no allies. He saw only creditors. I clicked the remote. Slide 1, the Porsche. This is the car Brielle drives, I said, leased in the name of the trust, paid for by the monthly dividends that were supposed to go to Aunt Martha's long-term care fund. Slide 2, the Maldives. This is the vacation Brielle took in February, I explained, funded by the withdrawal from the Cousin Lucas education grant. I went through them all, 12 slides, 12 daggers. I did not raise my voice. I did not use adjectives. I just showed the dates, the amounts, and the lies. When I reached slide 11, I paused. This is a screenshot of a text I received last night from Brielle. I said, the text appeared on the giant screen. Don't make Mom and Dad lose face. Brielle let out a sob. She covered her face with her hands. They are not worried about the theft, I said to the room. They are worried about the image. Gordon was shaking. He looked like a man trapped in a burning building. She stole that data, he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. She hacked my computer. She is a criminal. That is why she got fired. Ask her about her job. She was fired for unethical behavior. I clicked to the final slide. It was the report from Northline Integrity Solutions, the one verifying the forgery. Actually, Dad, I said, I was cleared of all charges this morning. I pointed to the screen. This is a forensic analysis of the fake evidence sent to my employer. It proves that the incriminating photos were created on the desktop computer in this house and edited on an iPhone registered to Brielle Hart. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the space. Fraud is one thing, I said, looking at Brielle. But framing your own sister? Trying to destroy my career because you were afraid of losing your allowance? Brielle shrank back against the wall, weeping openly now. It is a lie, Gordon roared. He was losing control completely. It is all fake. She is the one lying. She is jealous. She has always been jealous. Enough. The voice was not Jonah's. It was Uncle Robert's. Robert walked to the front of the room. He did not look at Gordon. He looked at me. Is the petition filed? Robert asked. Yes, I said. The motion for an emergency injunction was filed at 8 o'clock this morning. Robert nodded. He turned to the crowd. We have already spoken to the lawyers. He announced, as of this afternoon. The banks have been notified. The accounts are frozen. An independent auditor will be here on Monday morning. Gordon looked around wildly. You can't do that. It is my money. I am the trustee. Not anymore, Jonah said. We have the majority. You are out. Gordon. Marianne stood up. She looked small and terrified. Her world of country clubs and flower arrangements was crumbling. Please, she begged, wringing her hands. Family is family. We can't let money destroy us. Gordon did his best. He loves you all. Can't we just handle this privately? I looked at my mother. I finally saw her clearly. She was not a victim. She was the gatekeeper who had kept the gate closed on the truth for decades. We are handling it privately, Aunt Sarah said, stepping forward. Her voice was shaking with tears. That is why we are not calling the police. Yet. Gordon sank into a chair. He put his head in his hands. The fight had gone out of him. He was not a titan anymore. He was just a bankrupt old man who had spent everyone else's future to buy his own present. I unplugged my laptop. I put the invoice back in my portfolio. The room was buzzing now. Relatives demanding answers. People shouting at Gordon. Others comforting Aunt Martha. The structure of the Hart family had collapsed. But the foundation, the truth, was finally visible. I walked toward the door. Natalie! Brielle called out. Her voice was desperate. Where are you going? Help us! I stopped. I turned around one last time. I looked at the chaos I had unleashed. It was ugly. It was painful. But it was real. I helped you. I said, I stopped the bleeding. I looked at Gordon, who was staring at the floor. On my birthday, you invited everyone to watch you cut me off. I said, you wanted a show. I opened the door. The night air was cool and clean. I walked out. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently, with a soft, final click. I walked down the driveway to my rental car. I did not look back at the house. I did not check my phone. I got into the car, started the engine, and drove away from Stonebridge. I had no inheritance. I had no family trust. I had no parents to go home to. But as I merged onto the highway, heading back toward the city and my own life, I realized I was richer than I had ever been. I was free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and truth, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this video reach more people. I would love to hear from you. Comment down below and tell me where you are listening from and what you would have done in my shoes. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.